It's a beautiful Sunday morning here in Cheshire, and the sunshine is fantastic, and the sky is very clear, and it's very still. There's no wind, just the sound of the birds and the stream running at some distance away. And I'm thinking about believing still, and the relationship between concepts like belief and other concepts I've spoken about recently, particularly the concept of knowledge, and perhaps also things like certainty and doubt. But right now, belief and knowledge. And I'm just thinking about how I'm understanding these terms, or what kinds of processes might underpin my understanding of those things. And again, I'm leaning here on conceptual metaphor theory and cognitive linguistics. The idea that my ability to engage in abstract thought, or to conceptualize abstractions like belief or knowledge, is made possible through the application of metaphors. And the one I've spoken about before, which I'm going to just go into again here if I can, is that really well-established one, that believing is seeing. So when I use a term like belief, when I mobilize that concept in sentences, or try to do what I would consider to understand that concept, I would say somewhere, although I'm talking about belief, non-consciously, I'm thinking about seeing. That's one of the things I'm thinking about. And I think there's some significant differences between connected relationships, but certainly differences between the metaphors associated with believing, including the believing is seeing metaphor, and those associated with knowledge or knowing. And I think those metaphors tend to be around two things. They're metaphors to do with space and proximity, and they're metaphors to do with sensory modality, and I think they're connected. The first thing to do with space and proximity is, for reasons I've already spoken about, believing, to the extent that believing is seeing, that necessarily implicates distance. In order to see, you have to place yourself at some remove from the object of your attention. I can see this tree here because it's positioned some distance away from my body. It's not in contact with me. It's not so close that I can't make it out, or that it's out of focus, nor is it so distant that it's disappeared over the horizon of my awareness. And that's just part of the eidetic logic of seeing, is that things have to be placed in a certain relationship to the body. And I think when we talk about believing, it's conceptually inheriting that logic. So believing necessarily involves a distancing. It also, I think, to the extent that believing inherits the logic of seeing, seeing is also highly perspectival. It highly locates one in a particular space. When you say you can see something, it not only says something about the thing that you're looking at, it says something about where you are standing in order to be able to gain access to that. It says something about the kind of territory you're occupying. It says something about the other things which you may be able to see at the same time, and also the things which might be hidden from you. So again, there's some entailments to do with that. So if I'm saying that if seeing is borrowing from those entailments, then again, when I say I believe something, I'm also specifying some territoriality to that belief. And I think I'm borrowing from James Carr's here, that I was recommended recently, who talks about that in a book called The Religious Case Against Belief. He talks about belief being a kind of situated, territorial, that it has those kind of metaphors to it. And I think that's absolutely present within the believing is seeing metaphor. There's also the entailment to do with height as well, in seeing. If I'm higher up off the ground, I can see more. It just forms, again, part of the logic of seeing. And I think that plays itself out in believing also. If I can claim some kind of elevated position for myself as a seer, S-E-E-R, then I can claim the authority that goes with that elevated position. And so the beliefs that I testify to when I'm in that elevated position have an authority which those who are located lower down at ground level may not have. And they may indeed submit to my authority if I'm in that elevated position of a seer, and may adjust their beliefs accordingly. So I think, again, there's an entailment playing itself there that relates believing and seeing specifically to the logics of space and how seeing operates within space. There are other things as well to do with believing and seeing as well, I think, to do with the kind of ontology of objects, but I don't really want to get into that today. Knowledge, on the other hand, I think plays itself out very differently, or knowing, I suppose, really plays itself out very differently. Knowledge, as I've spoken about before, tends to be not distanced. When we're talking about different kinds of information, different kinds of knowledge, we almost invariably place the entities that we call knowledge either very up close and personal to the body or inside of the body. If there is an entity of, I'm getting confused in my terms here, but if there is an entity of knowing outside of the body, we don't call it knowledge, we call it data, or we call it information. Those things are necessarily disembodied, and knowledge can only exist when it kind of becomes incorporated into the body of a knowing subject. So by definition, almost, knowledge doesn't have that distance, doesn't stand at some remove out there in visual space. It enters the body and becomes part of the subject, and possibly even the disposition of the knower. So it can't be seen. What is inside the body cannot be seen. It has to be accessed through different sensory modalities. It might be felt. It might be understood, almost as if one is standing underneath this piece of knowledge and holding it, supporting it. It might be accepted. I can't think of any other phrases, but those are the kind of engagements we would talk about when we're talking about knowledge. We might be moved by it, we might feel it. We don't possess knowledge, it kind of possesses us, I think, in that sense. So there's that thing to do with proximity. It moves inwards, and also it plays itself out in different sensory modalities. Also, in relation to its contrast, to the believing and seeing thing in that relation to territoriality, once this kind of stuff has entered the body and become incorporated, knowledge, the territoriality kind of becomes irrelevant. You're not locating a particular point in space from which to gain an oversight or from which to declare a kind of viewing position on these beliefs. You know, you're not required to state a perspective on this knowledge that you are with belief. It doesn't have any of that territoriality. It doesn't have any concerns with elevation and height. It's purely, in its most prototypical form, I guess, it purely is of the body and internal. Okay, I'm not sure if I've really got out what I wanted to try and say there, but basically all I'm trying to get to with that is that there's that the way that belief and knowledge are understood as being different is partly determined by the conceptual metaphors that we use to think about those concepts, and whereas believing is understood through metaphors of seeing and the various entailments of that metaphor to do with distance, to do with elevation, to do with particular location in conceptual space. Knowledge uses different metaphors. It uses metaphors of possibly proximity, but certainly even incorporation into the body, no distance, and uses the metaphors associated with sensory modalities to do with touch, proprioception perhaps, feeling, possibly even things like taste, internal modalities, and seeing plays no part in that, along with the entailments of seeing like territoriality, perspective, elevation, and so on.